Hey everybody, what's up? Ehren here, Question Period Canada. Guess what? I've got a question for you. Did you know that there was no question period taking place today on Parliament Hill? Yeah, they're on the road this week, so there's not going to be any live question periods from the Commons. But what we have this evening, we're going to cover a previous Senate question period, because we've done a couple of these and they're super interesting. The flow is completely different than the House of Commons, where it's really more of a circus. Like, it's very entertaining, don't get me wrong there, but these senators seem more sophisticated or laid back or experienced. It's just a different process. And just a couple of things about the Senate you might not know. Back in the day, they were all appointments. They still are appointments, but they used to be for life. Now they have to retire by the age of 75, which is too bad, because one of the most interesting senators I've noticed is Senator Plett, and he's getting close to that cutoff. Anyhow, there's also 4 different regions that cover Canada: the Atlantic region, or Maritime region, and they have 24 senators. There's the Quebec region, they've got 24 senators. Ontario, 24 senators. Western Canada, 24 senators. Newfoundland and Labrador have 6, their own region, and each of the territories has 1. So there's 3 more there for a total of 105. There's currently 11 vacant seats. That's it. So we're going to jump in. We're going to jump into question period right away.
Question period. Période de questions. Senator Plett.
Let's check it out. Here we
Government
go. Like,
leader,
subscribe. Get that going
last
too.
Thursday, after 8 long years, Prime Minister Trudeau finally admitted that he is not worth the cost. Common sense conservatives have been saying all along that the Prime Minister's carbon tax makes everything more expensive. He finally agrees. Prime Minister, he says he'll axe the tax, but only on home heating oil, and only after the next until after the next election, and only to try to save Liberal seats in Atlantic Canada. Leader, why not go all the way? Why not axe the tax on the entire carbon tax, so families all across Canada can afford to heat their homes, drive to work, and feed themselves?
It's coming.
Really well
Senator
spoken.
Gold.
Well, thank you for your
Gold is well
question.
spoken too.
It is not the intention of the government to axe the tax, as I've said on many occasions. As many of us know, there are many issues that are and challenges facing Canadians, and one of them is the cost of heating with oil. It's higher to heat with oil than other sources, more volatile prices, and folks don't have the ability to switch to a heat pump. It's a reality for many Canadians across the country, including Atlantic Canada, and the use in Atlantic Canada is much higher, as those of you who live in the East know. The percentage of folks in Atlantic Canada who eat with oil as opposed to other sources is much higher. That's why the government is providing a 20% rural top-up to the Climate Action Incentive, giving people the time and financial support to transition to more sustainable choices such as a heat pump.
A lot of people around here do have heat pumps. I'm in Nova
Atlantic
Scotia.
Canada, and natural gas isn't cheap. A Trudeau cabinet minister, the Minister for Rural Economic Development, has made it clear this is pure politics, nothing else. Minister Hutchings told CTV that Canadians need to elect more Liberals in the prairies to get carve-outs from the Trudeau carbon tax policies. Elect more Liberals. An old saying about a carrot and a stick comes to mind, Leader. Is that the role of the carbon tax? A carrot for those who vote Liberal and a stick?
Senator Gold.
Oh, he got cut off, but he asked his questions with a lot of vigor.
The temporary exemption for heating with oil applies across the country, wherever people find themselves forced to do that without the alternative some of us enjoy. By helping people switch through the rebates to a heat pump, the government is making sure that families across the country have an affordable and sustainable way to keep their houses warm.
I did some research on what the different types of senator
We in
groups
Saskatchewan
are.
have been long keenly aware of the fundamental unfairness to rural Canadians of Trudeau's punitive carbon tax scheme. We have fought against it for 7 years. Now the Trudeau government is given a carbon tax break to those who use home heating oil, which essentially only applies in Atlantic Canada. Is this climb down rooted in logic or common sense? Of course not. Even your so-called rural economic development minister admits it's for crass politics. They voted Liberal. The Trudeau plan is to quadruple the carbon tax. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister thinks rural Canadians should be happy with the measly extra $10 a month he just announced. Saskatchewan's had enough. If Justin Trudeau won't exempt Canadians who heat with natural gas, Premier Moe vows he will no longer collect the carbon tax for the federal government. Senator Gold, when will your government do the right thing and axe the carbon tax on home heating for everyone on everything?
Senator
What would
Gold?
happen if a province just decided
Thank
they
you for
weren't
your
going to collect the
question.
tax?
Again, it
What
is
would
not the
happen?
government's intention to axe the carbon tax beyond axe the carbon tax, nor am I aware of any plans to extend the temporary suspension of it to other forms of heating. I am aware of Senator Moe's pronouncements. It remains the case, however, that putting a price on pollution remains the most effective, market-oriented tool to address climate change, that the government is making adjustments in consideration of the particular circumstances of those in certain circumstances is simply a reminder that the government cares about Canadians as it does about fighting climate change.
Senator Batters.
That tiny rural
Serious
supplement is your
woman here.
government's admission that rural Canadians are unfairly walloped by the carbon tax. And while you give Atlantic Canadians a break on oil heating, this does nothing for those of us in the often bitterly cold West, where we must heat with natural gas. In fact, you and your Trudeau government have stalled and gutted a bill to exempt egg operations from carbon tax, as you again penalize prairie farmers. Why does this government continue to punish Western Canadians, farmers, and rural Canadians? Don't they elect enough Liberals?
Imagine
Senator
how hard it's got to
Gold.
be for farmers, how expensive the carbon tax must be.
The government's programs, whether to deal with climate change or assist Canadians in other respects, are designed to be fair to all Canadians. Canadians in this diverse country live in different circumstances. Programs affect people differently. And that is just the reality of living in a federal system. But no, this is not a question of politics. It's a question of proper administration of public policy.
Every
Senator
Canadian,
Simons.
if you're looking for Mark Gold, he said that
Thank
he
you
lives
very
across
much.
the street from the Israeli consulate. See,
I'm
he could
delighted
find it.
to learn that 5 new colleagues will soon be joining us here in the Senate. Very delighted. They look like extremely qualified people to join us here in the Senate. I cannot help but notice, however, that there are still 5 vacancies in the Western Canadian bloc of senators, including
We
2
mentioned
from
that there was
Alberta.
11
That Alberta
seats.
has not had a full complement of senators for 3 years now, and 3 years and a half. So I'm not going to ask you today, government representative.
I'm sorry. Senator Simons has the floor. Please continue.
Good.
I'm not going to ask you today, government representative, when those seats will be filled. But I also can't help but note that all of the seats for the people who are on the selection committee for the 4 Western provinces are currently vacant. Can you tell us when you intend to fill those seats?
It's a good question.
Senator
We mentioned at the
Gold.
beginning of the show that there was an 11
Thank you.
empty seats.
And
So
I
that's a
don't,
concern. That
I
seems like
don't
a lot. It's more than
have the
10%.
answer as to why all the seats are vacant. But I do know, of course, that I do know, as senators, of course, would know, that each province's committee is made up of seats both nominated by or brought forward by the federal government and by the provincial government. So in that regard, we all regret the delay in filling all vacant seats. Regret indeed, and personally do, the fact that seats in certain provinces, those to which you made reference, have not been fulfilled. I have, as colleagues would know, it is part of my regular representations to government to encourage the seats to be filled, and I'll continue to make those representations.
Senator Simons.
I think it's a matter of public record that the Premier of Alberta, the current Premier of Alberta, does not intend to nominate people because she believes in the previous government's senators in waiting election process. Does that mean that Albertans will be denied representation in the Senate until there's a change of government in Alberta, or does the government intend to do something to fill those seats?
She's getting to the
Senator
point,
Gould.
because that's the second time she asked the same
I cannot comment
question.
on what the government's plans may be
Very
if
similar
the
question.
government of Alberta continues to resist participating in the process that brought so many of us to this chamber. The government continues to believe in collaboration and cooperation with provincial counterparts to find to establish the process to bring people to this chamber.
Senator
He
Deakin,
sounded at the beginning
Ontario.
of his answer like he was going to give a more stern
Thank you.
answer, but he backed
Last
off.
Wednesday was the 25th anniversary of the Haldeman Treaty. On behalf of Chief Hill, this question goes to the government representative in the Senate. Senator Gould, the Ontario Superior Court has rejected the my apologies for the interruption there. Rejected the Haudenosaunee Development
her phone
Institute's
was ringing.
motion to intervene in the Six Nations of the Grand River Indian Band's long-standing action against Canada and Ontario. The Ontario Superior Court has also endorsed a timetable for the remaining pre-trial steps in this action, which should see it ready to begin trial in early 2024. Given that it has now been determined that the HDI will have no role at all in this litigation, and given that the action is going to trial in the coming year, why has the federal government not yet taken any meaningful steps to enter into negotiations with the Six Nations of the Grand River to resolve
Senator
the
Gould.
claim?
Thank you for your question. The government is committed to working collaboratively to address Six Nations historical claims and their land rights in a way that respects the unique history and circumstances of the Six Nations. It's my understanding that the government has sent a letter, and apologize for the pronunciation, to the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Chiefs Council and the Six Nations elected chief and council, seeking to design a process to work together on mutual priorities. Any lasting approach to address these matters requires a collaborative effort from all parties. Again, the government is committed to working with the Six Nations elected council, the Confederacy Chiefs Council, and the province of Ontario to discuss how best to support Six Nations in advancing their
This
interests.
lady's texting.
Senator Deakin,
Thank you, and thank you. I am looking forward to hearing that the letter has been received. It's not something the chief is aware of at this moment, so I'm hopeful that, as you said, it was in motion and that it is true collaboration as we work through this. Thank you.
I love the
Senator
flow of
Deakin,
these
Nova
shows.
Scotia.
Does anybody else like the
Thank
flow
you
of
very
these
much,
shows?
Your Honour. My question is for the government representative in the Senate,
periods?
Senator Gould.
Canada?
Open banking is about giving consumers and businesses control over their financial data so that they can use it for their personal benefit rather than the bank monopolizing its use for its commercial benefit. Inaction is preventing Canadians from securing more affordable, innovative financial services. In its 2021 election platform, this government committed to implementing open banking by early 2023. Despite Finance Canada having run highly inclusive and transparent consultative processes to develop an implementation plan, no action has been taken. Consequently, Canada continues to fall behind our global peers, who are making their financial sector work harder to create opportunities and reduce costs for their citizens. Senator Gould, why is the government faltering on its promise to implement open banking at a time of rising costs for Canadians? And what is the current timeline? Thank you.
I find he very
Senator
much looks
Gould.
like the stereotypical
Well, thank you for raising
politician.
the issue and for championing the issue, as you have done admirably in this chamber and beyond. I do not know what the timeline is, nor do I have an explanation for why legislation has not yet been introduced. I will certainly take your concerns back to the minister, and so that they will be and communicate them those concerns to them. Modernizing our approach is an important objective and one that I know is being considered and pursued, and I will certainly make every effort to understand further and communicate those concerns to the minister.
He's so
Senator Deakin,
soft-spoken.
Nova Scotia.
Thank you, Senator Gould. I hope that you do communicate as well that there is risk in inaction that goes well beyond risk in action at this point in time. Consultations have been extensive. The government should be proud of the work that they've done. And so I would just ask that you do communicate that as well. Thank you, sir.
Senator Gold. Senator Klein.
This is great, the flow of it.
Senator Gold,
So
my
much
question
information.
is with respect to C-18, the Online News Act in Northern Communities. In August, Catherine Tate, President and CEO of CBC Radio Canada, wrote to Meta, asking Meta to consider that many people living in remote northern communities in Canada depend on getting news on Facebook. This was during the wildfires that forced the evacuation of Yellowknife. She wrote, and I quote, "Given the emergency conditions, we are calling on you to exempt people in these communities from Meta's current blockage of news accounts in Canada so that they're able to share critical news on those accounts, including evacuation order information." Senator Gold, what actions has the federal government taken or planned to ensure that everyone living in northern remote communities can be informed of risks normally shared on the news via Facebook?
Senator Gold.
Thank you for your question. We all know in an emergency, every second counts, and Canadians rightly expect that they be informed as quickly as possible when there is an imminent threat to their safety. We've seen too many tragic examples of lives lost when that is not the case, and it's not only in northern and rural environments, regrettably. And public alerting to risk is a shared responsibility across all levels of government.
They just never
the
do
Government
this
of
in the
Canada is
Commons.
working closely with its provincial and territorial partners through the National Public Alerting System, NPAS. I have been assured that the work is ongoing to further strengthen this alerting system. The work is active, it's ongoing, and it is designed to ensure that it continues to meet regional needs and keep Canadians informed and therefore safe.
It's interesting because
Senator
they don't
Klein?
do that in the Commons.
Yes,
he discusses
please.
both sides
that
of the
alert
issue.
system is great for alerting some, but there's a coordination of resources and communities and families that needs to take place, and that is a void there. And I experienced that, or we experienced that in Saskatchewan during that mass murder. If the impasse with Meta is not resolved, does the government have ideas for the medium and long term to fill the dire gap in local news access for these communities?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you, Senator. Look, the Online News Act is designed to build on and strengthen existing supports for journalism, including the Canadian Journalism Labour Tax Credit, and to increase funding to the periodical fund that many, many local media rely upon, along with other local journalism initiatives. These are all important steps the government is taking in its commitment to continue to support local journalism and their role in keeping Canadians informed and safe.
Senator Martin.
Government leader, in March, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business released a report titled Fueling Unfairness, Carbon Pricing and Small Business. This report estimates small businesses pay close to half of the carbon tax revenue collected by the Trudeau government. However, only 0.17% of all carbon tax revenues was returned to small businesses between the 2019-20 and 2022-23 fiscal years. Clearly, the Prime Minister's carbon tax is not worth the cost to our entrepreneurs. Leader, why did your government use the carbon tax funding set aside for small business to pay for the rebates announced last week? Why won't you just axe the tax to help small business across Canada struggling to survive?
Senator Gold.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you for your question.
You
Every
cannot
time, right?
fight climate change, an existential threat to our planet, our community, our children, our well-being, without a suite of measures which includes putting a price on pollution. Small businesses are the lifeblood of our economy. This government has been there to help them through the pandemic. They continue to be helped. There's help still available in terms of the deferral of repayment of the benefits that kept them afloat during the pandemic. And the government will continue to consider measures to assist those whose economic, entrepreneurial wherewithal provides jobs, security, and a future for all Canadians.
So if
Senator
small
Martin.
business is the lifeblood
The Prime
of the
Minister's
Canadian
two carbon
economy,
taxes,
I think the big
alcohol
corporations
escalator tax,
are like vampires.
increased payroll taxes and red tape, skyrocketing rent and interest rates, and accusing small business owners of being tax cheats. This is the legacy of 8 years of Trudeau government when it comes to small business. So, Leader, will your government bring forward a common sense plan to help our entrepreneurs, control your spending, and set a time frame to balance the budget as the CFIB has asked?
Senator Gold.
It's the position of this government that the plans that the measures that they have taken, they are taking, and will be taking are balanced, proportionate, and prudent to guide this economy forward.
Senator Carignan.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Ma question.
Thank you. My question's for the Leader of the Government. In its March 2021 decision on the constitutionality of the carbon tax, the Supreme Court stated that one of the reasons the federal government could impose minimum national standards for GHG pricing was that the failure to include one or more provinces or localities in the legislative system would jeopardize the successful application of this system in other parts of the country. By delaying application of the carbon tax on heating oil, the Trudeau government clearly decided to favor the Atlantic provinces where this type of heating is popular. The foundation of the carbon tax system is crumbling. According to the Supreme Court criteria, the federal government's raison d'etre in this area is to impose standards on all the provinces. Senator Gold, isn't last week's decision another nail in the carbon tax coffin? Senator Gold, thank you for the question and for
the translators are better.
Analysis of the Supreme Court's jurisprudence.
That's a better translator.
The government's policy applies to all of Canada. However, the fundamental answer is that the plan to fight climate change is changing to take into account circumstances as well as impacts on those who are subject to disproportionate costs, who have to take on costs that are not the same.
Donc, c'est ma réponse.
And that's my answer.
Senator Carignan.
Senator Carignan.
Lors de l'annonce, l'ensemble du.
And yet we saw in the announcement that the entire Atlantic caucus participated in the Prime Minister's announcement. Liberal MPs bragged that it was thanks to their effectiveness that the carbon tax would not apply to their province. Does that mean that the 2 Alberta Liberal MPs, the 4 Manitoba Liberal MPs, and the 76 Ontario Liberal MPs are ineffective?
Loin de ça.
Far from it. It means that in a broad and diversified caucus, as is the case in this government, there are divergent interests. And they have arrived at solutions that are appropriate for the circumstance. Senator Lafrida.
Sénatrice Miville-Deschênes.
Senator Miville-Deschênes.
Senator Gold.
Senator Gold. Land invasion by Israeli forces in northern Gaza started Friday in response to the horrible attack by Hamas. Thousands of children and adults of the Gazawi people have lost their lives. There's been Israeli assemblies insisting on protecting civilians. Canada has remained rather passive and has not asked for a ceasefire. What will it take to get there? In the meantime, some Canadian experts, are they right to believe that Canada is giving Israel a blank check to act? Senator Gold.
Merci pour la question. Le Canada.
Thank you for the question.
This is a weird piece. This
Canada's
has been so much French for. Usually they speak English, yes?
The same as that of the United States and the European Union. Now, the United States, nor Canada, nor anyone else who understands the history is asking for a ceasefire because, as the Prime Minister explained, it does not help anyone in Gaza, either Israeli or Palestinian. Canada, as I've said before in this chamber, is asking for a humanitarian pause so that the humanitarian aid that is required can be offered to citizens in Gaza. That position is in line with that of our allies. Senator Miville-Deschênes. Yes, I'd like to come back to the hospitals in northern Gaza. It's a question that is deeply troubling. Israeli forces demand evacuations. However, staff is refusing because that would mean certain death of many people who need ventilators. Is there not any international principle of humanitarian law at play? Does Canada have an opinion on this situation, which is difficult to accept? Senator Gold.
If anybody's still watching, give us a like if you're still watching.
Of course, there are standards of international humanitarian law. There's also standards that prohibit the use of human shields or the use of hidden weapons in schools and hospitals. Israel's army is facing an enemy that does not respond to any standard of humanitarian law. Civilians are victims of this war. We have to be realistic and well-informed. Thank you, Senator Gold.
Senatrice Coyle.
I don't know if Canada can really have any impact
My question is
in
for
the
the government
Gaza
representative
situation.
in the Senate.
That's pretty big and a
Last
pretty
week, the
old
Senate
problem,
Standing
right?
Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Trade had briefings about the situation in Afghanistan. I asked witnesses about Bill C-41, the legislation we passed back in June that amends the criminal code, anti-terrorist financing offenses, to facilitate the delivery of much-needed international assistance in geographic areas controlled by terrorist groups, such as the Taliban in Afghanistan. I asked witnesses if they're seeing any increased flow of aid as a result of the passage of the bill. Usama Khan, Chief Executive Officer of Islamic Relief Canada, indicated that the implementation of the bill is not moving fast enough. He said the application and understanding of exactly what Bill C-41 looks like in the process of the authorization regime, some of those details haven't been fleshed out yet. According to some aid agencies, the status quo, it's still status quo. There's no clarity on what's allowed and not allowed. So, Senator Gold, how does the government respond to the request from aid agencies for clarity?
Thank you, Senator.
On the
Senator Gold. Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question, and thank you for underlining, as if the world doesn't have enough tragedies, that which has befallen the people of Afghanistan, not only recently, but frankly for much of my adult life, and our adult life. I don't have the information to answer your question with any confidence, Senator. But it is an important question.
You never hear the MPs say, I don't know, ever.
I certainly will bring these questions to the attention of the Minister in the hope that I'll understand better.
Senator Coyle.
It's just so different.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that, because this is urgent. It was urgent back in June. It's even more urgent now. At last week's briefings, again, of the Foreign Affairs Committee, we also heard from Arif Lalani, former ambassador of Canada to Afghanistan. Mr. Lalani emphasized that Canadian officials need to be on the ground in Afghanistan to see the situation for themselves. Mr. Khan of Islamic Relief emphasized that engagement doesn't mean an endorsement. So, Senator Gold, our Minister of Foreign Affairs talked about pragmatic diplomacy yesterday in Toronto. What could pragmatic diplomacy be?
Keep cutting her off.
Senator Gold.
Let her finish.
Again, I really am not able to answer that question, only to underline, as we all know, how challenging this particular circumstance is, given the position that the government and those in control of Afghanistan have taken, not only to the outside world, but frankly to their citizens.
Senator Housakos.
Senator Gold, Justin Trudeau and the Liberal NDP coalition finally flip-flopped on their cornerstone public policy.
I like the way this guy answers.
And of course, the Prime Minister didn't flip-flop on the carbon
really
tax because he finally understood what future Prime Minister Pierre-Poilievre has been talking about for years, that a carbon tax causes inflation. It rises the cost of living. It pummels middle-class, poor, and working-class Canadians. No, not at all. The reason why he flip-flopped on this is because he's seeing plummeting polling numbers for the Liberal Party of Canada and desperate Liberal MPs from Atlantic Canada. But the question is, why just for Atlantic Canada? And the other question is, if Justin Trudeau finally has understood that he and his carbon tax are just not worth the cost, why isn't he now planning to axe the tax from coast to coast to coast to give relief to all segments of the economy and all sectors of the population?
Senator Gold.
I'm not going to comment on the branding and taglines and that are clearly.
This is a little more common.
I've got 1 minute to answer your question. You asked a whole bunch of questions. The government has no intentions of axing the tax, and
Vous pouvez continuer à répondre.
What's going on?
And
you can continue to answer.
We'll continue to take the measures and take into consideration the measures that are appropriate to address the significantly important issues of combating climate change, while also providing relief to Canadians and supporting our economy going forward.
Senator Housakos.
Well, you have axed the tax. You've paused it, but for a certain segment in Atlantic Canada for home heating. And we've had your minister, Minister Hutchings, who this weekend was on Question Period on television, and she said clearly in black and white, the reason we're only doing this segmented cut is because we're only helping Liberal voters in Liberal sectors of the country. And if the other parts of the country and other sectors want the same kind of relief, they should be voting Liberal. Is that the position of this government, or will the Prime Minister and your government reel in this minister for either lying or saying the truth?
Senator Gold. Senator.
Well, this government
this is a bit longer episode,
believes that this Senate ought to be a place somewhat different than the partisan, hyper-partisan.
Gold, à vous la parole.
Senator Gold, you have the floor.
The government has no intention of doing what you suggested, and I guess my 15 seconds are up, and I'll leave it at that.
Mark Gold gets rattled easy, maybe. Like
delayed answers, réponse différée, ordre du jour, orders of the day.
Oh, look at what happened. It ended really, really quickly. What do you think of that, guys? I think it's awesome. I like the flow. I like the professionalism. Right there at the end, it did start to get a little heated. You saw Mark Gold being distracted by the questions that Mosaicos was asking. Is that the name? And I'd like to let you know we will be covering the Senate. This week, the House isn't sitting, so everybody's on the road. There's no question periods that are new. We will be covering these, and when there are new ones, we will be covering those on the day that they're happening, because this stuff is just too interesting as we learn more about the politics, and we are learning more about the politics. Before the next show, what my idea is going to be is to be able to explain what the different senator groups are. It looks like there's 4 or 5 of them: independents, non-affiliated, PC, conservative. We'll have information to bring you on that. I like this stuff. I hope you do too. Like, subscribe. I'm Ehren. This is Question Period Canada. It's been a lot of fun hanging out with you guys. We're getting better at this, and it's getting easier, and it's more fun. The more we know, the more we learn, the more we have to share. That's it. Getting going. We'll catch you tomorrow. I've got some other videos that I'll be posting later tonight, so hopefully you can check those out. I made a video yesterday. It's my most popular one that I've ever got. I got like 45,000 views or something already. That's pretty big for my channel. Anyhow, things are getting good. We're getting better. Things are growing. That's great. Anyways, we'll catch you later. I'm Ehren. Question Period Canada. Catch you next time. Thanks, guys.